Okay, here's the adapted version for an English-speaking audience, focusing on American cultural equivalents where possible. Note that some cultural nuance will inevitably be lost, but the goal is to create a relatable experience for the target audience, block 1 of 5. The crystal goblet glittered under the chandelier as she raised it, her cold eyes meeting mine across the exquisitely set table. A toast, my mother-in-law announced with that sharp smile I'd learned to fear, to my son Daniel, who has finally found someone worthy of him. She turned her face towards the woman seated next to my husband, a former college classmate of his, all dolled up, expensive perfume permeating the air, and added, someone who truly understands his world, who shares his values, his upbringing. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt every pair of eyes at the table turn to me, some with pity, others with morbid curiosity, awaiting my reaction. My fingers tightened around the linen napkin in my lap until my knuckles turned white. Daniel said nothing. He just lowered his eyes to his plate, cowardly, while that woman smiled victoriously, and my mother-in-law toasted with her, as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were just a temporary obstacle soon to be removed. In that moment, sitting in that luxurious dining room that never felt like home, with the weight of 15 years of marriage collapsing on my shoulders, I understood that I had hit rock bottom. But what they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that I was about to rise in a way they would never forget. My name is Helena. I'm 42 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've just been Daniel's wife. Not the Helena who dreamed of being an architect, not the Helena who sketched designs for sustainable houses in old notebooks when she was a teenager in the outskirts of São Paulo. No, I became the convenient shadow of a man who allowed his family to tear me apart, piece by piece, year after year, until there was almost nothing left of who I really was. I met Daniel when I was 25. I worked as a secretary in a law firm, not my dream job, but it paid the bills and helped my mom, who raised me and my two brothers alone after my father walked out on us. Daniel was one of the junior lawyers, fresh out of law school, full of ideals and pretty words about social justice and equality. He seemed different from the other men I knew. He read books, talked about art, looked me in the eyes when we talked. When he asked me out for the first time, he took me to a small off-Broadway theater, not an expensive restaurant. He said he wanted to impress me with experiences, not money. I fell in love with the version of him that existed away from his family, away from expectations, away from judgments. We dated for 2 years before he finally took me to meet his parents. I remember that day like it was yesterday, every detail etched into my memory, like a scar that never completely fades. I bought a new dress with the money I should have used to pay my share of the rent. I got my hair done at the cheapest salon I could find. I practiced my smile in the mirror, trying to look confident, trying to look good enough. Their house was everything mine wasn't: large, silent, full of expensive objects that served only to display status. Daniel's mother, Beatrice, greeted me with a hug that didn't really touch me, as if she was afraid of contamination. Throughout dinner, she asked questions that seemed innocent on the surface but cut deep. Where did your parents go to school? What neighborhood does your family live in? Which university did you attend? Each of my answers: my father isn't in the picture, the wrong side of town, I couldn't afford college, I needed to work, was met with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, followed by a heavy silence that said everything her words didn't. Daniel's father, Robert, was more direct. At the end of the night, when Daniel went to get the car, he approached me on the porch and said, almost as if he were doing me a favor, my son has a bright future ahead of him. He needs someone who can walk beside him in these circles, not someone he needs to carry. I felt my face burn, but I kept my head held high. With all due respect, sir, I replied with my voice trembling only slightly, love shouldn't be about carrying or being carried. It should be about walking together, supporting each other. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You're still young. One day you'll understand how the real world works. Daniel assured me that everything would be okay. He said his parents were old-fashioned, but that they would learn to love me as he loved me. He said our love was stronger than any prejudice. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I needed to believe that love could in fact conquer all. We married 6 months later, in a small ceremony that his family tolerated more than celebrated. Beatrice cried throughout the whole ceremonial, but they weren't tears of joy, they were tears of mourning for the future she had imagined for her son. The first years were a silent war. We moved to a modest apartment, and I continued working while Daniel built his career. But at every family dinner, every social gathering, every event we went to together, there were comments, glances, small cruelties disguised as concern. "Helena, don't you think that dress is a bit simple for the occasion? Darling, perhaps you shouldn't comment on politics, it's a complex subject. Daniel, don't you miss more intellectual conversations?" When I became pregnant with Lucas, I thought things would change. I thought a grandson would soften Beatrice's heart, that it would create a bridge between our worlds. But the pregnancy only intensified her invasion of our life. She had an opinion on everything. The doctor I should consult, the hospital where I should give birth, the nanny we should hire. And Daniel, a coward from the start, gave in to her every demand, saying it was easier to agree than to argue, that she only wanted the best for her grandson. Lucas was born on a September morning, and when I held him for the first time, I felt a love so devastating that I thought my heart would explode. That perfect baby, with his dark eyes and tiny hands, was mine. Ours. I swore I would protect him from everything, that he would grow up knowing he was loved unconditionally, that he would never feel he wasn't enough. But Beatrice had other plans. She started subtly, of course. Comments about my parenting methods, suggestions on how I should feed him, dress him, educate him. When Lucas was 3 years old and spilled juice in her house, I heard her whisper to a friend, "Poor boy, there's no structure at home. His mother doesn't know how to set limits." When he started school, she insisted on a ridiculously expensive private institution that we could barely afford, saying she wouldn't allow her grandson to attend just any place. Daniel agreed, of course, and I had to take a second job, working at night, as a freelance consultant, just so we could afford the tuition. For years I accepted the humiliations because I thought I was protecting my marriage, protecting my son from seeing family conflicts. I swallowed my anger, my pain, my dignity, and put it all in a locked box in the depths of my soul. I convinced myself that it was strength, that it was maternal sacrifice, and of a dedicated wife. But the truth is that I was losing myself, erasing myself, turning myself into a pale and silent version of who I should be. The last straw began to form 3 months before that fateful dinner. Daniel was promoted to partner at the firm, something he had been pursuing for years. We should have been celebrating together, but when he came home with the news, the first thing he said was, "My mother wants to throw a celebratory dinner. It's going to be important, Helena. Clients, partners from the firm, influential people, you need to measure up." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Measure up," I repeated, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. He looked away. "You know what she's like. I just don't want any problems that night." In the following weeks, Beatrice called almost daily with suggestions about my appearance, my clothes, my hair. She offered to pay for a personal stylist, a spa treatment, etiquette lessons. Each offer was an insult wrapped in gift paper, and Daniel remained silent, allowing her to reshape me as if I were a renovation project that embarrassed the family. That's when I met Marina. She appeared on Daniel's social media, first in comments, then in photos. "I miss the college days," she wrote on one of his posts. "We need to meet up to reminisce." Marina had everything I didn't have: a degree from a prestigious university, a traditional family, that confidence that comes from never having been questioned about her right to be anywhere. And Beatrice adored her immediately. She commented on her photos, invited her to lunches, talked about her with a sparkle in her eyes that I never had the privilege of seeing when she talked about me. When Daniel casually mentioned that he had invited Marina to the celebratory dinner, I felt a chill run down my spine. "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She's just an old friend, Helena. Don't be insecure, it doesn't suit you." But I saw something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or excitement, or both. And I knew that something was very wrong. The night of the dinner arrived like a sentence. I put on the dress that Beatrice had chosen. Black, conservative, expensive, but that somehow made me look even more faded. Lucas hugged me before I left, his 11 years making him old enough to sense that something was wrong. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, and tears stung my eyes, because I knew he was the only person in my life who truly saw me. Beatrice's house was immaculate. As always. The table, an altar of fine porcelain, and imported flowers, the guests, all perfectly dressed, perfectly polite, perfectly cruel in their empty cordialities. And Marina was there, sitting next to Daniel as if that were her natural place, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm casually, looking at him with an admiration that used to be my exclusivity. During the appetizers, I endured the looks of pity and the whispers that weren't as discreet as they thought. During the main course, I heard Beatrice and Marina talking about places they had visited, books they had read, people they knew in common, a shared world from which I was eternally excluded. And Daniel participated in that conversation with an enthusiasm he hadn't shown me in years. It was as if I was watching my marriage being dismantled in real time, piece by piece, and everyone at the table was complicit. If you're following this story and want to continue receiving true and emotional accounts of overcoming and transformation, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Then came the toast. The moment when Beatrice raised that glass, and with carefully chosen words, publicly declared that I was not enough, that I never would be, that there was someone better waiting to take my place. And Daniel did nothing, absolutely nothing. That man for whom I had sacrificed my dreams, my dignity, my years, simply sat there, in silence, allowing his mother to humiliate me in front of strangers. Something inside me broke at that moment. But unlike what they expected, tears, a dramatic exit, a public collapse, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was as if a fog that had covered my vision for 15 years suddenly dissipated. I saw everything with perfect clarity: Daniel's weakness, Beatrice's calculated cruelty, Marina's participation in that theater of humiliation. And I saw, finally, what I had become. A woman who had allowed herself to be erased because she believed that loving meant disappearing. I calmly got up from the table. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I placed my napkin next to the plate and looked directly into Beatrice's eyes. "Thank you for dinner," I said with a voice that surprised me with its firmness. "And thank you for the clarity." I looked at Daniel, who finally had the decency to look ashamed. "You will hear from my lawyer." Then I turned and left that house with my head held high, each step a reclamation of my dignity. What they didn't know, what I myself had forgotten somewhere along those lost years, was that I had resources of my own. Remember those freelance jobs I took to pay for Lucas's school? For years, while I diminished myself at family gatherings, I was quietly building a career as an interior design consultant. I worked at night, after Lucas was asleep, after Daniel went to bed without noticing me. I had built a respectable portfolio, a network of satisfied clients, and most importantly, a bank account that was all my own. More than that, I had saved everything. Every text message between Daniel and Marina that I found on his phone, every email, every compromising photo, every piece of evidence of the emotional betrayal that had been going on for months, maybe years. I wasn't stupid. I had just chosen the right moment to act. And that moment had finally arrived. In the following days, while Beatrice was probably celebrating what she thought was my final defeat, I was busy orchestrating my resurrection. I hired the best divorce lawyer in the city, ironically, someone Roberto had mentioned as the most aggressive in the business, and prepared my case meticulously. I opened my own design company, something I had been planning for months. And most importantly, I sat down with Lucas and had the most honest conversation we had ever had. "Mom, why does Grandma always talk to you like that?" he asked me one afternoon, his eyes full of a wisdom that no child should have so early. I took a deep breath and decided that I would no longer protect him with lies. "Because she thinks some people are worth more than others based on superficial things like money and last names. But she's wrong, Lucas. A person's worth comes from within, from their kindness, their strength, their integrity." He was silent for a moment, processing. "You have all of that, Mom. You're worth more than all of them put together." In that moment, I knew that everything I had endured was worth it, because I had raised a son who saw clearly. The divorce process was brutal. Daniel and my family fought with every weapon they had: money, connections, expensive lawyers. But I had something more powerful: the truth, the evidence of the betrayal, the financial record showing how I had contributed equally, sometimes more, to our home, witnesses willing to speak about the years of emotional abuse. And I had my own voice, finally, after so long silenced. There was a particular moment during a hearing when everything changed. Beatrice was there, of course, sitting behind Daniel like an imperious queen. Their lawyer tried to portray me as a gold digger, as someone who had taken advantage of Daniel. It was then that my lawyer presented the records: all the overtime hours I worked, all the money I put into the joint account, all the sacrifices I made while being treated like a burden. And he also presented the messages, not just between Daniel and Marina, but between Beatrice and Daniel, where she explicitly encouraged him to leave that unsuitable woman and find someone appropriate. I saw the color drain from Beatrice's face. I saw Daniel sink into his chair, unable to look at me. And I felt, for the first time in years, the sweet taste of justice. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about having my reality finally recognized by impartial witnesses who could see beyond appearances and money. The final settlement gave me half of everything we built together: shared custody of Lucas, with him being able to choose where he wanted to spend more time when he was a little older, and something more precious: my freedom. The freedom to rebuild my life, to pursue my dreams that I had buried, to be entirely myself without apologizing. My design company started small, but grew quickly. It turns out that years watching Beatrice's meticulously decorated spaces taught me a lot about what people with money value, but they also taught me something more important: that true luxury isn't about ostentation, it's about personality, about spaces that reflect who we really are. My work was different, authentic, and people responded to it. Within a year, I was earning more than Daniel, working with clients who respected me, creating something of my own. Lucas flourished without the constant toxicity of that environment. He still saw his father, of course, but he began to choose to spend more time with me, in our smaller house, but filled with laughter, real conversations, genuine love. And I saw my son transform into a young man who understood that character matters more than surname, that kindness is worth more than status, that respecting people, all people, is the mark of true education. 3 years after that dinner, I was standing in my own gallery, inaugurating an exhibition of my designs. It was a small but significant event, with clients, true friends, and Lucas by my side, proud. It was then that I saw Beatrice walk in. She was older, the weight of time and perhaps remorse visible in her eyes. She approached hesitantly, and for a moment I thought she was going to ignore me, as she always had. But she stopped in front of me, and for the first time her gaze wasn't one of disdain. It was something akin to respect, maybe even admiration. "You've built something remarkable here," she said, her voice without the usual arrogance. I looked at her, this woman who almost destroyed me, and felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction with her forced humility, just a deep peace of knowing that she no longer had power over me. "Thank you," I responded simply, and turned to greet other guests, leaving her there, realizing perhaps for the first time that the power she had over me was always just the power I gave her by believing her words. Daniel tried to reconcile several times. He would call late at night, send messages saying that he had made a mistake, that he loved me, that things would be different. But I had learned the most important lesson: true love isn't about grand declarations or empty promises. It's about consistent actions, about daily respect, about being seen and valued. And Daniel never gave me that. He loved me in his own way, perhaps, but not enough to defend me, to prioritize me, to choose me instead of his mother's approval. As for Marina, I heard that she and Daniel stayed together for a while. Beatrice finally had the daughter-in-law she always wanted. But the latest news that reached me suggested that even that relationship was falling apart. It turns out that Daniel wasn't capable of being a partner to anyone, not because I lacked breeding or pedigree, but because he lacked a backbone. A man who can't defend his wife from humiliation can't build anything lasting with anyone. Today, I look back and see that night, that cruel toast, that public humiliation, not as my lowest point, but as my turning point. Of turning. It was the moment I finally woke up, when the pain became big enough to overcome my fear of being alone, of starting over, of admitting I had wasted years in a situation that would never serve me. I learned that we are not defined by those who mistreat us, but by how we choose to rise after. I learned that sacrifice without reciprocity isn't love, it's self-destruction. I learned that teaching our children to be kind is important, but teaching them to demand respect is crucial. And I learned that the most important forgiveness isn't what we offer those who hurt us, but what we offer ourselves, for accepting so little for so long, for believing the lies they told us about our worth. There's a quiet strength in rebuilding your life from the ruins that others created. There's dignity in choosing yourself when everyone expects you to keep sacrificing. There's power in realizing you never needed their approval, that your worth was never in question, only your courage to recognize it. My story isn't unique. How many women are sitting at tables where they aren't respected, in relationships where they are diminished, in families where they are only tolerated? How many are waiting for permission to be themselves, to pursue their dreams, to demand the love and respect they deserve? If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in this pain, know you are enough. You always have been, and the day you decide to believe that, truly believe, will be the day your real life begins. That toast that was supposed to break me, it ended up freeing me. And today, when I raise my own glass, in celebration of my achievements, surrounded by people who truly love me, with my son smiling beside me, I understand that the best revenge isn't making others pay for their cruelties. The best revenge is building a life so authentic, so full, so gloriously yours, that their opinions become completely irrelevant. It's living so well that the humiliation they tried to inflict becomes just a footnote in the larger story of your resurrection. I'm Helena. I'm no longer anyone's wife, anyone's inadequate daughter-in-law, the diminished version they asked me to be. I'm a woman who fell, who rose, who rebuilt. And now, finally, I'm enough. Not because I proved something to them, but because I proved it to myself. And that, I discovered, is all that ever mattered.